Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Hormonally Speaking. We're going to do something totally different today. I am talking to my old friend Ryan, who is all about sleep and all of the ways that sleep can impact so many parts of your life and how it can help guide you in so many different things. We're going to get into all kinds of fun, spooky things like sleep paralysis. I know that this is something that has kind of gained traction in the last few years that people didn't realize that they had before. And now they have a term around it and understand what's going on. So we're going to dive into that. We're going to dive into utilizing your dreams in different ways in your life. It's going to be the perfect podcast for your Halloween week. So I want to welcome my guest, Ryan Dungan Hurd, who's an educator, author, and dream researcher. He is interested in consciousness studies at the intersections of ecology, spirituality, and material culture. His latest work is Lucid Talisman, Forgotten Lore. Ryan has been featured on NPR, CNN, Coast to Coast, Psychology Today, and many more. With a background in both archaeology and dream research, Ryan currently teaches graduate level courses at University for Peace in Costa Rica and National University in California. Ryan is a member of the International Association for the Study of Dreams and abides by their ethical guidelines. His website, dreamstudies.org, has been going strong since 2007. He currently lives in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Ryan.
Hey, thanks for having me today. It's good to see you.
It's so good to see you. So I didn't mention that, we've known each other for quite a few years now, right?
20
Because
years.
I'm like something like that. But amazingly, we're still just in our 30s. I don't know how that
Yeah,
happened.
how did that happen?
It's crazy how it works like that. So, yeah, Ryan and I went to school together at a school that is enveloped into another school now. Is that the
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happened to it?
So it was a sweet little holistic
Yep.
studies, crunchy little consciousness studies school that is now part of a larger university, national university. But let us say that that program, consciousness studies, still exists. Holistic studies is
Okay.
still
Part of
so,
okay.
so it lives on.
Yeah. And did you teach there for a while?
Yeah, and I still
Yeah.
do. I teach now with National University. I teach psychology of dreams.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. I love that. Yeah, so you still got the deeper connection. I love um sort of the friendships that I made at that time of life, and something that I was talking to someone about recently was it was the first time I experienced that container of support to dive deep into the stuff that we don't ever want to dive deep into, right? That our culture does not want us to dive deep into.
Yeah, no, for me, graduate school was healing, literally
Mhm.
healing for me, and because of the community support.
Mhm.
It wasn't just the information, it was that we all supported one another on our journeys, and it was literally transformative.
Absolutely. And we'll get into this more later, but you now have a community where you're supporting people in transformation too, right? I mean, that's the thing about creating communities and being part of communities is that there is just this powerful ability to transform in ways we can't just on our own.
That's right. Yeah, it really is. I think community adds this level where we can essentially reflect back our hopes, our aspirations, and we support one another when we fall down. And I
Yes.
love how community just galvanizes any kind of transformative educational healing process.
Absolutely. And it's something that has been a part of so many traditional cultures, so many cultures still all over the world. And we're missing out on that a lot in American culture, right? This sort of isolated aspect has impacted us a lot, and really finding those pockets of communities I think is so key to, obviously we talk about hormone health a lot on this podcast, and when it comes to hormones, particularly women who have been gaslit or told they just have to put up with it, or it's just a part of aging and going into perimenopause and menopause. I'm like, no. And to be with other women going through the experience helps so much. It just really validates that reality, instead of being told that that's not real or it's just something you have to put up with.
Oh my gosh, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I see that too with the dream work,
Mm.
especially when dealing with tabooed topics,
Mm-hmm.
stuff that folks have decided isn't worth saying out loud, and so we have to whisper it, and or we have to just, do it ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
learn slowly and make all the mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big deal when you can find the folks who've been on that same path.
Absolutely. So let's start with sleep paralysis because I this is such a fascinating topic to me. I've never experienced it myself. I learned about it from you originally, and in the year since I learned about it from you, I hear about it in all of these different places. But for those that have never heard of it or maybe have heard about it and want to know a little bit more, can you break it down for us?
Yeah, sure. So this is such a fun Halloweeny topic because, this is the time of the year when we're allowed to talk about creepy, scary things
Yeah.
and
Just
real
this
life.
week.
Right, right. Here you go. And I guess we're comforted because we have pumpkin spice lattes in one hand, and then so now we can talk about spirits with the other, I
Right.
guess.
Totally. Works perfectly together.
Yeah, and yet sleep paralysis is something that people experience all year round, and it's a thing,
Yeah.
and it's a terribly named sleep and dream phenomena that it
Mm,
sounds so clinical and weird,
mm,
and it doesn't make room actually for the real weirdness, which is essentially the hallucinations that come along with it. And so what the topic is about is this natural phenomena that happens to most people have had it once in their life. It's very common where you may wake up and you feel a pressure on your chest or your throat and you realize you can't move. And then essentially there's some escalating fear that comes along with this. I'm being held down.
mhm,
Right? It's basically it's the stuff of horror movies.
mm.
It is where A Nightmare on Elm Street came from. Honestly,
Oh,
he, the director, Wes Craven, literally had this phenomena and based the movie on sleep paralysis as a phenomenon.
oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And so something or someone, there's a sense of, yeah, evil can kind of come into the space. And this is where, where you kind of like, it jumps the shark. You're like, that's bad enough, right? But
Yeah.
no, there's more. And so this is where we get the phenomena of the sensed presence. And so this is cross-cultural historically. We hear these stories and we experience it ourselves of I can't move, I'm awake, I'm in my bed, and someone is in the room.
Mm,
And
mhm,
either I can just feel them, or sometimes people can see something. Like sometimes it's like mists or something like that.
mm, mhm,
And then there is the full on experience either of the visual hallucination or vision of an entity,
mhm,
an ancestor, even an angel. It's not always creepy, interesting,
mm, mhm,
but it often is when we're scared.
mhm,
Uh, and so people will have that encounter. Um, and then there's sort of another way that it can go, which is that it's unseen, but it's called the incubus effect, where you can feel this malevolent creature on you and can
mm.
even cause and feel like they're sexually molesting you. And
Oh,
so it goes all the way into those territories, and it can be really terrifying,
yeah,
clearly, and
yeah,
triggering, and it can bring up past traumas. So that's it. That's a lot, right? That's a
yeah,
lot to say in sleep paralysis, but
yeah.
there you go.
So let's talk about a bunch of questions came up while you're talking. I want to talk about, I guess from a clinical perspective, what is underlying this in however many situations that it does, but then also what is the difference between sleep paralysis and actually experiencing seeing, an apparition or seeing a loved one, ancestor, or anything like that, because I can imagine there's a lot of people that tap into seeing that as simply, hey, I'm connected to the other side versus like what is going on from a psychological standpoint or, a physiological standpoint.
Yeah, it gets muddy really fast because of our belief systems.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a clinician, and I'm a dream educator, and I work with these experiences as dreams.
Hmm.
But there, it kind of bifurcates like this. Some folks get it as a sleep symptom for a larger health issue, such as sleep apnea or narcolepsy, or even something that's completely not sleep related, like diabetes, which can affect the
Yeah.
way sleep cycles go, or
Right.
chronic pain,
Right.
right?
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
there's so many things that can affect the sleep cycles, the sleep
Yeah.
integrity, which could cause this to happen. So folks with narcolepsy, I think, are the ones who suffer the worst from this
Mm,
because they'll sort of get stuck for 30 minutes at a time in a state of, of paralysis. And it can happen in cataplexy, it can happen in the middle of the day. So it can feel like an attack. Uh,
right.
and so that's sort of the medical extreme. And then there's the isolated sleep paralysis, and this is what happens for folks who don't have a diagnosed like sleep disorder or secondary health disorder. And this is the awareness of sleep paralysis that comes apparently just from bad luck, or perhaps anxiety, or perhaps
Mm,
something has changed in a temporary way with your body. It could be that you drank too much coffee the day before. Maybe you exercised at the wrong time and
mm,
affected the sleep. Because what's happening is we're essentially experiencing bodily awareness while we're asleep, while we're in REM sleep. And so the
mm.
muscles are paralyzed as they would be in a normal REM
Right.
dream.
Right.
So we're having paralysis all the time. We just don't notice it because we're dreaming.
Right.
So what's happening is that we become awake and aware in a bodily way of these sensations
Mm,
with this clarity of what, oh, I feel like I'm awake right now. So there's this sort of
right.
pre-lucid component to this that what's happening right now. This is not a dream. This feels real. And I think that's
Mm,
what makes it so creepy is
yeah.
is that if you've never had a vision state before, right? If you've never either had hallucinogenic drugs or gone through some kind of breath work practice or an altered state where you're awake and aware and yet experiencing, phenomena,
Mhm,
spontaneous, emergent hallucinations, it can be really, really devastating for
mm,
your mental health. And of course, what happens? We get scared, and that enter belief, enter all the
mhm.
beliefs.
Right. Right. Yeah. So when you do experience that, are you coming out of REM sleep then? When you become aware, or are you still in REM sleep
So it's a
and
little
aware?
mixed. So
Okay.
it's because the sleep staging is not it's actually not an exact science. And
Right.
so it happens on sleep onset.
Okay.
And sometimes that's REM sleep and sometimes that's quote
Right.
unquote light sleep.
Right.
But it can come coming out of sleep as
Okay.
well as moving into it.
Okay. Makes sense. Wow. So the other thing that came up for me when you were talking about, the diabetes, like we know that cortisol spikes happen a lot for women, particularly in their 40s or going into perimenopause. This is part of what impacts the sleep in a negative way, right? When women slept fine for their 20s and 30s and suddenly they're struggling with sleep, and blood sugar and cortisol are very much related, which is why we talk a lot about getting your blood sugar really stable during the day to actually help your sleep at night, because it is your blood sugar during the day that's going to impact that sleep at night. But really that cortisol spike is what is waking people up, in this situation. And I mean, I have clients all the time say, oh yeah, I wake up because I my bladder's full and I have to go pee. And I'm like, your bladder's full, but that's not what woke you up. You're going to feel like you have to pee because your bladder is full, but it's actually this cortisol spike. And so I can see how that plays a role in the situation too, right? The stress hormone that kicks up. And then if you're, if in a deep sleep and then the stress hormone kicks up, I can see how that reaction may show up in this kind of hallucinogenic kind of way.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
No, yeah, I think you're onto it because
yeah.
it's when you look at the prevalence rates, it's anxiety, which is probably the single number one indicator
Hmm.
for when it emerges like in an isolated way
Hmm.
for folks who don't have a sleep disorder. And so
Hmm.
that's why most of us, it's happened once in our lives, maybe, right? So
Mm-hmm.
over half for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it is related to these things that have to do with wellness and health,
Mm-hmm.
and mental health and bodily health. And it's, of
Mm-hmm.
course, it's all connected, but the way that what happened, how we spent not just the last 24 hours, but like, the way that we can degrade over a week or a month
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
from chronic stress or anxiety, or reading the news too much,
Yeah, being in this world.
right? Existing as a human.
Yeah, exactly. And does it sleep paralysis kind of build on itself too? Like once somebody starts experiencing it, that they're more prone to experiencing it?
Yeah, so there's a bad thing that happens is for folks who don't know what's happening, especially where well, it's so terrifying, and so people
Mm,
turn the light on, and they're too scared to go back to sleep, and so that
mm,
disrupts their sleep further, and so the next
mhm,
night they're disjointed, and then it can like occur again. So there is a repetitive, sleep paralysis. It's a clinical definition,
mm.
and it can be treated, by the way,
Yeah,
when
that's
it
what I was gonna ask. Yeah.
becomes like sufficiently disturbing to sleep and becomes repetitive and chronic.
Mhm,
The best thing going on right now is essentially a treatment that comes out of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's about relaxation strategies. It's mindfulness.
yeah.
It's kind of making a plan. This stuff is been kicked around by somatic psychology for probably 30, 40 years.
Mm,
It's being codified now.
mm,
The work of Brian Sharpless, I think, is probably a clinical psychologist. He wrote a book about the topic. From a clinical perspective,
mhm.
he's probably the leading figure in the clinical space that's really helping folks get their diagnosis and move into a treatment plan for when they're really suffering.
Interesting, and it's funny that you mentioned mindfulness, right? Because this is something that I tell women all the time to work on because of these, cortisol spikes not only at night, but during the daytime, right? And where we end up having kind of this lowered cortisol in the morning when we should have our highest, right? But then high cortisol at night when it should be at its lowest point and melatonin should be peaking. And there's no supplement. There's no, I mean, diet's an important part, but it's not going to take care of everything, right? We literally have to move out of this sympathetic nervous system that we're sort of consistently in and get into our parasympathetic nervous system more often, right? It's like that's just the evolutionary aspect of our bodies and the way that we really have moved throughout time, and we can't get away from that no matter how much we want to, and
Yeah.
try and push and try and keep going and going, and it just doesn't work. And so it's fascinating to me that even with sleep paralysis, it's a similar prescription, if you say if you want to say, to as dealing with a lot of hormone issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it gets tricky, doesn't it, with
Yeah.
giving advice for, say this stuff, or sleep troubles, because it's very easy to get into the you should be doing this,
Right.
dot dot dot. Like, here's one more thing that
Yep.
you're terrible at. And
And add to your list, right?
right. Yeah, it's not a good way to go about things. To move into sleep with some mindfulness, and to take care of ourselves, to make space for that,
Mhm.
is important. But to do it in a self-loving way,
Right.
with respect.
Enjoyable way too, right? I mean, I think that's the hard part a lot of times. It's like, and this is just, from my practice, what I see is, we know that being on the computer, on our phones, the blue light is stimulating that cortisol to go higher at night, right? So I often recommend taking, the technology out of your room and not doing that at night. And yet people feel like, well, this is the only time that I get to just like veg out. It's like I've been working all day, and then I came home and took care of the kids and cooked dinner and da da da. And this is my time to do that. And so I get it, it's sure in a perfect world we're gonna do this, but I think, finding things that you really actually enjoy. So, whatever that means for you. So, maybe that's, a foot bath while you're watching whatever on Netflix, or getting your blue light glasses. I'm a big fan of those because that's going to help your blue light blockers, and just kind of finding a way that you're able to wind your body down that you enjoy, that feels fulfilling to you in the evening.
Yeah, it's not about watching Netflix at night, right? It's not about having this Puritan kind of like
Mm-hmm.
perspective of I can't have this and I can't have that. It's
Mm-hmm.
about there's something that happens, television exists and is popular for a reason because we do actually relax and we enter
Mm,
sort of a state of taking in information that and emotionally can be very satisfying.
mm.
And so yeah, just don't have the blue light like a foot, right here. You don't want that,
Yeah.
take the blue light a little further.
Yeah.
And I love that idea about like some self-care rituals as part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do this. I must, I have arthritis, right? And so
Mm.
I'm often while I'm watching TV at night,
Mm-hmm.
you
How
know,
dare you, sir?
I'm massaging my hands. I've got my lotion set up and I'm massaging my
Mm,
feet and I'm just
mhm,
sort of right and so we know how to do this. So we just have to make I think it's about making a ritual out of it. And I think
mm,
a conscious ritual. And I think we
mhm,
give more attention to these things when we ritualize.
mhm, mhm. So, what about the people that do see this more as, hey, I am connecting to my spirit guides, or I, I guess I'm wondering if there's people out there that almost enjoy sleep paralysis, if that makes sense, because
Oh yeah.
they feel like it's like a connector to the other side.
So it's not either or.
Mhm.
It really can be a both and again, it comes down to folks' belief systems.
Mm,
Um, Often what I've seen, what I teach folks is to transform their encounters and to work with who shows up if they're willing to do
mhm,
that.
mhm,
Because often if we become more curious about what's happening, our curiosity can override the fear. And there's things to be learned. And there's
mm,
the encounter can actually move into healing spaces or informational spaces
mhm,
that whether it's unconscious or your spirit guide or the divine within. And I teach from an interfaith space, so folks provide their own platform, their own paradigm.
yeah.
But I do know that if you do that, that the encounters can transform. And I've had a healing experience in sleep paralysis. I once had an angelic figure lay her hands on
Mm,
my body. I was in a paralyzed state, so my ethereal body, I suppose you could say, or my dream
mm,
body. And when I woke up, I felt better.
mm.
i
I
had
love
i
that.
had gone to sleep with a bunch of inflammation in my belly, which is very typical for me. My stress goes straight there,
Mhm,
right? All those digestive symptoms that have plagued me my whole life.
mhm.
And she laid her hands. I felt the warmth in the moment,
Love it.
the fingertips. And in my mind, I'm like, what is this? And
Right.
just, I had to kind of like put it aside, my fear aside, and just surrender to that.
Mm.
And I woke up astonished to see that my inflammation had reduced and I felt better.
I think that's really powerful, because I think so many things comes down to, are we able to kind of sit with our fear, and I don't want to say push past it, but like have it there but continue forward, right? Instead of sort of moving away from it. And so I can't help but wonder if these aspects of sleep paralysis on some level are, us facing our trauma in some form or fashion, and kind of figuring out a way to work with that trauma, right? Because I see this all the time in my practice, like, and for every human being on earth, we all have trauma, right? We all have trauma from different points in our lives that are impacting our health today. And so much of working with our health is working with that trauma, facing that trauma on some level and processing it. So I could see how in these situations where, initially I get it, like I would probably have a lot of fear and want to run away too. But if you have it sort of consistently, if that's that opportunity to kind of be like, okay, I'm going to sit here and just like be in this place instead of feeling like I'm trying to get out.
Yeah, right. And what is also interesting about it is that sleep paralysis can become a portal to other
Mm-hmm.
states of consciousness as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you can sort of close, quote unquote, your eyes and move into a lucid dream state.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a dream now,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that I'm dreaming, and
Mm-hmm.
I can bring an intention. I can bring a healing intention into that
Mm-hmm.
dream.
You
I
don't
can
even need ayahuasca. You can
No, it's
just do
all
it.
there. It's all right there. And it's better integrated,
Yeah.
honestly, right?
Yeah.
It's easier to integrate these experiences
Yeah.
when you're not blasting off.
Yeah.
So, and out of body experiences also are related to sleep paralysis. And so that's
Mm.
another entire, thing that people experience,
Yeah.
which can be exciting. And it's like a vision state,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
People come,
Absolutely.
and there's wellness attributes, people have a shift of awareness, shift of consciousness, shift of confidence in their life and their life
Mm.
direction after having these kind of experiences.
Yeah. It's amazing. I love it. Do you see an uptick in this, in sleep paralysis and out of body experiences during this time of year?
No, I just hear people talking about it more.
More. Yeah.
Um,
I was
I
just wondering, since the veil is the thinnest, right? For those that aren't aware of that aspect, sort of Day of the Dead and Halloween, I guess too.
and I wonder if the cultural beliefs can allow, put a little pressure on that and allow these encounters to happen more.
Right.
I certainly see that that's true.
Yeah.
Uh, some of the research has shown that folks who do have paranormal beliefs tend to have more sleep paralysis experience with ghosts or
Mm.
aliens or zombies of that, things of this nature. And
Mm-hmm.
so so we know that the cultural aspect plays a role,
Yeah.
right? But there's something rooted in it that I think is deeper, and it's not about like we're just loading our cultural stories or our folklore.
Mm-hmm.
This is a spiritual experience
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to that level.
Yeah.
But then again, it doesn't. A lot of folks don't have the sensed presence, and they just experience the paralysis itself, and that in itself can be an interesting workshop for just doing body scanning, for instance.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
It's I'm going to put another term down. This often happens at sleep onset, which is hypnagogia. And so
I've never heard
hypnagogia,
that.
yeah, so hypnagogia is essentially imagery or sounds that you experience as you're drifting into sleep.
Mm.
And you can get it on the other end as well. It's like the bookends of
Okay.
sleep. And so when it comes
Okay.
out, it's hypnopompia and
Okay.
going in, hypnagogia. And so it's not a sleep stage, it's just a class of imagery that one sees in the lightest stages of sleep.
Mm.
Sleep paralysis is also often associated with this too. But people get hypnagogia without sleep paralysis. And this is like if you've ever had that experience where you're going to sleep and then you have a sudden dream flash of a car accident and you wake up
Mm.
and kick your leg.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
It all
Yeah.
happens all at once. So
Okay.
that's the hypnic jerk. And
Gotcha.
sometimes it just happens without the imagery, and sometimes it happens with this whole, spontaneous dream.
Yeah. I've definitely
Yeah,
experienced that wake from like in waking up, like where, I mean, I guess in a dream, something happening, or not even necessarily in the dream knowing, but you wake up and then I feel like some part of my body, something happened.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that hypnagogia is a great state for doing body awareness work. And
Mm.
so, for instance, I've noticed that when I'm just woken up from sleep, so it's like early morning, and I give myself about 10 minutes
Mhm.
after I wake up to try to reflect on my experiences and my
Mm.
dreams,
Mhm.
try to hold off the world just
Yeah,
for a
just a little bit.
little bit. And because if I can recall those dreams then they'll make it to my journal. Like I'll actually.
Mm. Mhm.
But what I've noticed that is when I'm in this state of like just, yeah, reverie, right? That my arthritis can feel more intense. I
Oh,
can
interesting.
feel the symptoms of my inflammation more than I do
Hmm.
in regular life. And other bodily ailments I can feel with greater acuity as well. And so I think that this could be a very interesting body tool for folks
Yeah.
if you wanted to play with that and see. You can really just sort of notice, and of course you can bring in your visioning. You can bring in your healing intentions in these moments as
Mm.
well.
Well, that speaks a little bit to what I was going to ask you next about utilizing your dreams or utilizing sleep in order to help guide you in your healing process. And that's like a perfect example of doing that. Are there other ways to utilize dreams in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, so absolutely. One of the best ways that I think that folks can try pretty easily is simply to ask a question or make an intention before you go to sleep at night
Mm.
to say, I'd like to meet with my dream physician.
Mm.
This is something that Larry Burke, who is a medical doctor and has researched breast cancer dreams,
Mm.
recommends for folks.
Oh, interesting.
That you can essentially ask this question and ask it for a few nights in a row and sort of then just see what comes. You have to have some amount of dream recall. You have to remember one or two dreams a night in order to really kind of get the most out of that practice.
Mm-hmm.
If you are
Mm-hmm.
dreaming a lot, then this is a way you can guide a question to your dreams and then see what emerges. And what I like about this method is that it's open-ended.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so you're saying, hey, I'm interested in my health or my wellness, but I'm not testing some assumption I have about what's wrong with me. I'm just saying, what steps?
Right. Right. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Because as you were mentioning that, I was like, oh, I've done that, but I think I've often just done it one night, and I like that you mentioned that do it multiple nights because I don't have dream recall every night. It just depends on how I sleep that night. And so it's interesting to give it a little time and space too and sort of
Yeah,
recognize you may
I
not
think
get it right away.
that's it. I mean, the whole thing is to sort of slow it down a little bit
Hmm.
and realize that we're not working on a 24-hour cycle
Right.
really
Right.
when it comes to our intentions. And so you might have a night you're feeling really focused and you've got the wherewithal to do such a thing.
Hmm.
The next night, maybe it's a Netflix night.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. And then the next night, though, maybe you're feeling it again. So you do the intention, like give it. So just like whatever the space of your life is, like I would say,
Mhm.
like think of a week as a unit of time to
Mm.
set an intention,
Mhm.
knowing that there's going to be some nights you'll be more susceptible to wanting to do a practice than others.
Yeah. And do you think that having a notebook or something to write your dreams down on next to you is a good sort of psychological reminder or way to remember your dreams more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I've been journaling my dreams since I was 15.
Wow.
And I don't remember every dream or even write down every dream that I remember. I would
Mhm.
I would be there's been times in my life where I allowed myself to do that and I journal dreams until noon. I'd wake up and journal dreams until noon
Wow.
and thank you for graduate school.
Yeah, for allowing that.
But we don't have that kind of time.
Yeah.
So there's a there's my practice these days is to either I have my phone near my bed, and so
Mhm.
I can like put a few notes down, or I can just auditorily speak a few notes into my
Mm.
phone.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, that's a great
Later,
idea. Yeah.
I'll flesh the dream out longhand into my journal.
Mhm.
But I'm also experimenting with apps. There's a lot of good dream apps these days because now they finally the API is open for speech to text.
Mm.
And so I'm using this new app called Elsewhere, and it's just got a very nice, clean profile as well as like rock solid privacy policies. And
Mm.
so
Nice.
my dreams are mine.
Yeah.
I'm not socially sharing them. It's not a social site about let's compare our dreams.
Mm.
It's for me.
Yeah.
And I'm really enjoying that digital piece as well.
Very cool. So, one last thing, what are some of your favorite ways to help people get better sleep or to support, deeper connected sleep?
So we touched on this a little bit, and it really is about thinking about sleep as not something I should be doing,
Hmm.
but as part of a larger rest and wellness complex.
Hmm.
And so we can't sleep unless we're relaxed. And so how do I make time to relax before bed?
Hmm.
And how do I
Hmm.
make time during the day to take care of myself and rest? And what does that mean? What does that rest look like?
Hmm.
So, opening the conversation up about what is my relationship to letting myself just be. And that's hard. And I admittedly, it's really hard because of all the machinations and the way that our society is run, and all the voices in our head
Hmm.
that tell us we're lazy,
Damn
right?
voices. Yep.
So
Hmm.
it's important, and so there's a rule that you should be resting 10 hours a day.
Mm.
That includes sleep,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
think about that is just like that's a lot. I mean,
That's
so
not many people are getting 10 hours a
and
day.
can we, and not all at once, but
Right.
can we, in that languaging, like taking a walk in the woods counts as rest.
Okay.
Because
Sure.
it's a certain kind of rest. It's maybe an emotional rest is
Yep.
happening.
Yep.
You're able to check in with yourself.
Yep.
But physical rest and putting your feet up and allowing yourself to have an evening. So it's part of that larger struggle. And when we do that, when we make more room for rest in our lives, sleep happens more productively.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Well, let everybody know how they can work with you and what you have going on.
Yeah, so my home on the internet is still dreamstudies.org.
Mhm.
And so you can find my articles there, as well as links to my books and projects and things of that nature. And you mentioned that I have a new community. It's called the
Mhm.
Dream Portal, but I'm not taking new folks in. However, you can get on the waiting list for that, and there's a,
Nice.
a way to do that on my website. So I'll be opening the gates to that probably later this season.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm loving that community. It's been a lot of fun just starting it, and I find that when I'm in community with my dreams, that my dream work's moving forward too. So
Yep.
it's
100%. Absolutely. I say it all the time. It's like I love doing my programs just as much because it keeps me sort of focused on the work too, and keeps me on that healing path in a way just me myself won't. Right? It's just the reality of the situation. So, I'm so happy that you're doing this membership. And I know it's going to be just fantastic. And, as it continues to grow and already is doing so well. So, yeah, thank you so much for coming on today and chatting with us.
yeah, it's been a delight, and I hope you have a happy Halloween.
I know. I was like, I would love to hear back from anybody too. If you want to shoot me a message about if you've experienced sleep paralysis and anything that you've done around it, because I think this is such a fascinating subject and really thinking about just the way that it ties in with hormones. That's why I'm so glad we've had this conversation because it's like, oh yeah, these things all come back right to each other. I mean, it is just health. It's just health. All right, you guys. Thanks for being here, and I will see you next week.